Egbert. Egbert was the first king to unite much of Anglo-Saxon England under one ruler. Born around 770, he was exiled to the Frankish court, where he trained under Emperor Charlemagne. In 802, he returned to England and became King of Wessex. He expanded his power after defeating Mercia at the Battle of Ellendun in 825 and gained control of Kent, Sussex, Essex, and Surrey. In 829, he was recognised as Bretwalda, or Overlord of England. Though Mercia later regained some independence and Viking raids began during his final years, Egbert stood firm. He won a key battle at Hingston Down in 838 against Vikings and Cornish rebels. When he died in 839, he left behind a stronger, more united kingdom. His descendants would go on to rule England for over 2 centuries. Ethelwolf. Ethelwolf became King of Wessex in 839 after the death of his father, Egbert, who had united much of southern England. He is remembered as one of the most successful West Saxon kings, whose reign laid the groundwork for the later achievements of his youngest son, Alfred the Great. Ethelwolf inherited not only a growing kingdom, but also the growing threat of Viking raids. Early in his reign, he won a major victory at the Battle of Aclea in 851, pushing back a huge Viking force. He also strengthened ties with Mercia through an alliance sealed by the marriage of his daughter Ethelswith to King Burgred. This alliance helped secure peace and expanded Wessex territory. A devout Christian, Ethelwolf went on pilgrimage to Rome in 855 with his younger sons Alfred and Ethelred. On the way home, he married Judith, daughter of the Frankish king Charles the Bald, forming another powerful alliance. However, while he was away, his eldest son Ethelbald seized the throne of Wessex. To avoid civil war, Ethelwolf agreed to rule only the southeastern part of his kingdom. Ethelbald was the eldest surviving son of King Ethelwolf and became King of Wessex upon his father's death in 858. Ethelbald ruled for just 5 years, with little detail recorded in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. His reign is best known for his controversial marriage to Judith, his young stepmother. After Ethelbald's death, Judith returned to her father's court and later eloped with Baldwin of Flanders. Their son would go on to marry King Alfred's daughter, linking the 2 royal families. Ethelbald's time on the throne was relatively quiet. He did not face major battles or territorial changes, and no great reforms are attributed to him. He died in 860, likely in his mid-20s, and was succeeded by his younger brother Ethelbert, who already ruled Kent and now inherited all of Wessex. Ethelbert became King of Wessex in 860 after the death of his older brother Ethelbald. Before that, he had already spent years ruling Kent and the southeastern lands as a sub-king under his father Ethelwolf and then his brother. Because he had good relationships with his siblings, especially Ethelred and Alfred, there was no drama or fighting when it came time for him to take the throne. It was a smooth and peaceful transition. Though his reign was relatively short, just 5 years, Ethelbert made some important contributions. Most significantly, he brought Wessex and Kent under a single crown, ruling both regions directly instead of appointing a sub-king. From then on, Wessex and Kent remained united, helping to form the early shape of a more centralized English kingdom. Viking raids were already becoming a regular threat by the time Ethelbert was king, though his reign was spared the worst of the invasions. Still, Ethelbert kept the kingdom stable, defended his lands, and ensured that Wessex remained strong and united under his leadership. He died in the autumn of 865, leaving the crown to his younger brother Ethelred. Ethelbert was buried at Sherborne Abbey in Dorset beside Ethelbald. Ethelred I. Ethelred I was the 3rd son of King Ethelwolf to inherit the throne of Wessex, ruling during one of the most perilous times in Anglo-Saxon history. His reign was dominated by the arrival of the Great Heathen Army, a massive Viking force that had already conquered Northumbria and East Anglia by 870. Soon after, the Vikings turned their full attention to Wessex. In early 871, Ethelred and his younger brother Alfred fought to defend the kingdom. They suffered a major defeat at the Battle of Reading, but struck back with a rare and celebrated victory at the Battle of Ashdown, where they killed King Bagseg and several Danish nobles. However, the West Saxons were later defeated again at Basing and Meritun. Ethelred died in April 871, likely from wounds sustained in battle. Although he had 2 sons, they were too young to rule, so his brother Alfred became king. Ethelred's short reign helped pave the way for Alfred's legendary defence of Wessex and the future survival of the Anglo-Saxon kingdom. Alfred the Great. Alfred the Great is the only English monarch officially known as the Great, and with good reason. He wasn't just a warrior king, he was a thinker, a builder, and a reformer whose influence helped shape what would eventually become England. He was the youngest son of King Ethelwolf and never expected to be king. In 871, he and his brother Ethelred lost the Battle of Merton. When Ethelred died shortly after, Alfred became king. At first, things were bleak. Alfred lost more battles than he won and was eventually forced to flee into the marshes of Somerset. From there, he led a guerrilla campaign and began rebuilding hope. By 878, he rallied enough support to defeat the Vikings at the Battle of Edington, forcing their leader Guthrum to convert to Christianity and agree to a treaty. This victory led to the creation of Danelaw, a divided England, with the Danes in the north and east, and Alfred's kingdom in the south and west. He also restructured the military, building fortified towns called burhs. He launched a small but more advanced navy to counter Viking raids. He also created a tax and land service system, requiring landowners to contribute soldiers and support based on the value of their land. Alfred also reformed justice. He emphasized fairness, education for judges, and clearer laws. He insisted on literacy and learning, not just for nobles, but for all freemen who could serve in public office. He had Latin texts translated into English, launched court schools, and even helped write or translate books himself. One of his greatest cultural contributions was commissioning the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, a record of history that still informs what we know about early medieval England today. Alfred died on the 26th of October, 899, likely from a lifelong illness, but left behind a kingdom more unified, better defended, and intellectually revitalized. Edward the Elder. Edward the Elder, son of Alfred the Great, had big shoes to fill, and he rose to the challenge. Though not as scholarly as his father, Edward ruled for 25 years as king of the Anglo-Saxons, earning a reputation for military strength, political strategy, and expanding the kingdom during constant Viking pressure. He began his reign in 899, but not without trouble. His cousin Ethelbald, the younger of 2 known sons of Ethelred, the first challenged his claim to the throne. He tried to raise an army to claim the throne, but failed to gather enough support and fled to Viking-ruled Northumbria, where he was accepted as king. In 901 or 902, he sailed to Essex and was accepted there too. The next year, he convinced the East Anglian Danes to attack Edward's lands, prompting Edward to strike back. During the Battle of the Home, on the 13th of December 902, the Danes won but lost many men, including Ethelwolf himself, ending his challenge to Edward's rule. Edward worked closely with his sister, Ethelfled, Lady of the Mercians, building fortresses and launching campaigns to reclaim Viking-held lands. Together, they pushed the Danes out of key areas like Leicester and East Anglia. Edward then absorbed Mercia into Wessex, extending his authority even further. By 920, Edward had become overlord of nearly all Anglo-Saxon England. Though his rule faced occasional revolts, especially in Mercia, he held firm. Edward died in 924 while putting down a rebellion near Chester. While Alfred laid the cultural foundation, Edward built the walls that protected it. Athelstan. Athelstan is widely regarded as the first true king of England. Athelstan's reign was long overshadowed by his grandfather, Alfred the Great. but he is now recognized as one of the greatest kings of the West Saxon dynasty. After the brief reign and death of his half-brother Aelfwed in 924, Athelstan was crowned at Kingston upon Thames in 925. He quickly expanded control into Viking-held York, subdued Welsh kings, and in 927 secured the submission of rulers from Scotland, Strathclyde, and Wales. This made him overlord of nearly all Britain just 2 years into his reign. He demanded tribute, set borders, such as along the River Wye, and enforced his authority through diplomacy and force. He even extended influence through European marriage alliances using his sisters. In 934, he launched a major campaign into Scotland, forcing King Constantine II into submission. But the peace didn't last. 3 years later, Constantine joined a coalition of Scots, Vikings, and others to challenge Athelstan at the Battle of Brunanburh, 937. The battle was brutal, but Athelstan and his brother Edmund won decisively. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle called it the greatest slaughter ever seen on English soil. Beyond the battlefield, Athelstan was a lawmaker and reformer. He strengthened justice and helped shape the early English legal system. Deeply pious, he sponsored monasteries and promoted learning, building on the legacy of his grandfather. Athelstan died in 939 in Gloucester, having created a unified and centralized English kingdom. Edmund I. Edmund became king at just 18, after the death of his half-brother, Athelstan. He inherited a united but fragile kingdom, still under threat from Viking invasions and internal unrest. Early in his reign, Edmund faced a major challenge from Viking king Olaf Guthfrithson, who seized York and parts of Mercia. A treaty was brokered, but it forced Edmund to give up the 5 boroughs, an early blow to his rule. Fortunately, Olaf died soon after, in 941, allowing Edmund to reclaim the lost territory and re-establish control. Edmund then turned his attention to other threats. In Wales, the rebellious Eadwulf was defeated, allowing Hywel Dda, a new, more cooperative ruler, to rise. In the north, Edmund defeated and killed Dunmail of Strathclyde, later handing Cumbria over to Malcolm I of Scotland in exchange for an alliance. With England, Wales, and Scotland somewhat stabilised, Edmund was able to assert himself as overlord over much of Britain. Internationally, he played a key role in helping restore his nephew, Louis IV, to the French throne after he was kidnapped. Edmund continued his brother Athelstan's legal and cultural reforms, supported religious revival, and helped revive scholarly activity. He married twice and had 2 sons, Edwig and Edgar, both future kings. But in 946, his reign was cut short when he was stabbed to death during a brawl at Pucklechurch. With his sons too young to rule, the crown passed to his brother Eadred. Eadred became king in 946 after the murder of his brother Edmund I. Though Edmund had sons, the Witan chose Eadred, then in his early 20s, because the children were too young to rule. Despite poor health that would plague him throughout his life, Eadred proved to be a determined and capable king. Eadred inherited a fragile but united England, recently consolidated by his elder brothers Athelstan and Edmund. Almost immediately, he secured the loyalty of the Welsh and Northern lords. But it didn't last. Northumbria soon broke away and invited Eric Bloodaxe, the exiled Viking king of Norway, to rule. Eadred struck back hard, burning Ripon and threatening worse if the rebellion continued. His brutal response worked. Eric fled, and Northumbrian nobles resubmitted to Eadred's rule. In 954, Eric was finally defeated and killed, ending Viking rule in York once and for all. Eadred appointed Ossulf of Bamberg as the first Anglo-Saxon ealdorman of Northumbria, solidifying control. Eadred died unmarried and without heirs on November 23, 955, likely in his early 30s. He was buried at the Old Minster in Winchester. Though often overshadowed by his more famous brothers, Eadred's reign was crucial. He was the king who finally ended Viking rule in Northumbria and held England together.